Good morning. I'm going to open up the staff hearing officer meeting for February 23rd, 2022. Let's start with preliminary matters. So item 1, request for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of X agenda items. I have not received any. And then number 2, announcements and appeals. I can say that I may have mentioned this the last time around, but the Planning Commission suspended my decision for 418 North South Sepulveda Street. And so that will be scheduled at the Planning Commission hearing coming up soon. So please check back in with the Planning Commission's agenda for when that will be up. And then I will go ahead and move on to public comment for items not on today's agenda. So if anybody wishes to speak on items not on today's agenda, you can do so by please raising your hand using the hand icon in the bottom left-hand corner. And that will indicate to us that you wish to speak. And while I'm waiting, Ms. Gu, did we receive any correspondence on items not on today's agenda?
No, we have not received any general comment for items not on the agenda today. Thank you.
Great. And I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. And we can go ahead and open it up for today's project A. The first item is 1150 San Roque Road, the Cater water treatment. This is a proposal to install a new battery energy storage system to support operations and energy resiliency at the city's Cater water treatment facility. The project is proposed by Tesla Energy in coordination with the city. The BESS, which is the battery energy storage system, would consist of 1 Tesla Megapack and 8 Tesla Power Packs on an approximately 800 square foot equipment pad and related electrical equipment on a separate small pad. No new buildings are proposed. A portion of the facility perimeter fence would be moved to enclose the project. 7 trees would be removed and new plantings provided. The discretionary application under the jurisdiction of the staff hearing officer required for this project is a front setback modification to allow the proposed ancillary equipment to be located within the 35-foot front setback from San Roque Road. And okay, I'm going to go ahead and ask Mr. Rahman, the staff planner, to go ahead and if you could walk us through the project, and then we'll open it up to the applicant and keep moving. So Mr. Bauman, whenever you're ready, thank you.
Okay, good morning, Ms. Kokenda. Well, you read the project description, so I think we know what the project is and the request for the front setback modification. So this is on Upper San Roque Road above Foothill Road. It's a residentially zoned area, but as you get further up San Roque Road, you have the Lauro Reservoir on one side of the road to the east, and it's approximately across the street from the Cater water treatment facility. So the Cater facility, in working with Tesla, is proposing to install a battery energy storage system for battery electrical backup for the facility. And the location they've chosen that would be most appropriate for their needs to place the new equipment is in the required front 35-foot setback. So if we could go to the site plan, we can see that. Here's the site plan. There's a lot going on here. And as the applicant described in their letter, the reason they chose this placement is because they're working around a lot of utilities and existing development, et cetera. And you can see all those lines all over the place on this site plan. We've got a front lot line there and the 35-foot setback from that. So over toward the left-hand side, the larger equipment outside the fence there is the larger, actual battery storage. And those that were able to be tucked just outside the 35-foot setback. So then more in the center of this plan sheet, inside the fence, is a small building that's the electrical room, and it's like the electrical center for the facility, I guess you could say. So that's where the electrical equipment that connects the batteries to the existing Cater electrical system needs to go. So they're proposing to put it on the south side of that building, which means it would be outside the existing fence and within the 35-foot front setback. The other locations around that vicinity of that electrical system, facility staff just say they need clearances, and they have other areas that would be outside the front setback that wouldn't be as good to meet their needs for this project. So they've requested to encroach a little bit into the front setback here. The facility overall, a lot of times a facility's perimeter fence would be following the front lot line. But for this facility, the fence kind of goes in and out. It basically was constructed to enclose the development of the facility rather than following the front lot line. And that really results in a nice appearance from the street, because you've got the fence back as far as it can be, really, to enclose the facility. And then outside the fence is nicely landscaped. So it's a pretty attractive and long, I forget how long the frontage of the facility is. It's quite a big site, about a 12-acre site with over 1,200 feet of frontage. So they've chosen this spot, and the fence would be adjusted, again, consistent with what they've got. I don't know if Mr. Russell could follow the fence line. It's called out there with a call out, but anyway, the fence would be moved south just to follow, just to enclose the new equipment the way the existing fence encloses the existing facility equipment. So the fence would still be back well beyond the front lot line, and the landscaping would continue to be provided outside the fence. They do need to make some adjustments for the landscaping by removing and replacing trees and other landscaping. The project requires ABR, Architectural Board of Review, Design Review approval. It went to the ABR once before this hearing to get comments for your consideration, and the ABR was supportive of the site planning. They did think that the landscaping that was presented to them at that hearing needed more work and needed additional plantings to provide better screening and more continuous visual screening from the street. So that would go back to the ABR if the modification is approved for that. And we're confident that a good landscaping screening solution will be found by working with the ABR. So given the applicant's desires for the project and what the project needs to accomplish, and their request or need to preserve the existing area of the site, it's a large site, but there's not that much of it that's relatively level and usable to be used for future projects. Staff can support the wish to encroach a bit into the front setback. We think it's an appropriate improvement and a reasonable request. So with that, we can recommend approval of the front setback modification. I think that concludes what I have to say for a presentation, but I can certainly answer questions. And I think in terms of alternate design options, I think the applicant could better speak to that, because they know better the reasoning why they didn't choose some other location that wouldn't require a modification. But anyway, that concludes my presentation for now. Thank you.
I appreciate that thorough presentation. And yes, I'd like to ask the applicant, hang on, I've got Ms. Seeger, if you could come join us and turn your video on and walk us through your project. And as Mr. Baumann was saying, I'd really appreciate hearing a little bit more from you about the design alternatives and kind of why you selected this spot in particular.
Sure, no problem. Thank you all for having me. Thank you for the thorough presentation and staff report Tony, Mr. Bauman. Just as a quick intro, I'm Jessie Sager. I'm a land development manager at Tesla Energy, but I am a resident of Santa Barbara for over a decade. I really appreciate the opportunity to present, and I'm happy to answer any questions. The one thing I just wanted to emphasize was that this battery project is being developed based on a mandate and generous incentive from the California Public Utilities Commission and Southern California Edison, with the intent of providing grid resiliency and emergency backup power to a defined critical facility in an area that's prone to both planned public safety power shutoff events and unplanned grid outages. So essentially this work represents, let's see, the project's valued at more than a couple $1 million, and it's being done at a $0 contract to the city. The system can also be operated to provide the co-benefit of storing grid power during times of the day when energy rates are low and deploying during times of day with higher rates, thus saving the city on utility costs as well. As Tony mentioned, I just want to emphasize that the piece of the project that is requesting the setback is less than 100 square feet, a small pad with some of our smaller equipment that really does need to be as co-located as feasible with the existing electric system and meters. So that is why we were able to put the batteries themselves beyond the setback, but needed to have this smaller pad with equipment as close to that building as possible. I will note, and it is shown in the project materials, that we'll be painting that ancillary equipment within the setback to be color matched to the existing building behind it. So visually, the change is not intended to be noticeable at all, particularly since the fence will be moved, relocated to enclose that new equipment as well. So the design intent of the proposed project is to be as unobtrusive and low impact as possible. And to achieve that, we sited it adjacent to the existing facility structures and set back as far as we could from the street and the public right of way. The site for both the battery and the ancillary equipment was chosen from several alternatives because they satisfy a handful of criteria. And we did have a couple site visits with the actual site staff and with Alelia from sustainability, just to make sure we were checking all the boxes for the city. So this site in particular avoids removal of several larger trees. As Tony mentioned, we did get, I believe, we got approval to remove 7 trees from the Street Tree Commission and the Public Parks and Rec Commission. We'll be replacing all those trees at a 1-to-1 ratio, both within this area as well as an adjacent city site. This site avoids existing utilities, which, as you can see in the site plan, they are crisscross zigzag all over the place here, both underground and overhead. So we wanted to avoid those with adequate clearance. There's also an area preserved for future development at the existing facility on the northern side of that existing fence. That was actually our first choice location, but the facility has plans for future development, so we were not able to use it. This site also complies with the facility manager's design standards and clearances from internal roads, buildings, and existing utility equipment. It uses the flattest feasible area of this spot to minimize grading and earth disturbance. And as mentioned, it's proximate to the facility's point of interconnection for the system. So we did look at a number of criteria here to puzzle piece this project in where we thought it made the most sense. As Tony mentioned, with our first ABR hearing, we did get the feedback that we need to provide a more thorough landscape plan, which we are working on. The landscape plan we provided was simply to show the tree removal and replacement, but we will be showing both the existing vegetation and coverages and tree canopies, as well as the new proposed plants, which we believe this new landscape plan will show that the new equipment will be adequately screened and we will be able to maintain the general feel of this area. And I think that was all I wanted to cover, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Sager. I appreciate it. And now I'm going to open it up to public comment, and then we'll come back for questions. So if you are a member of the public and you wish to comment on this particular project at 1150 San Roque Road, please do so by raising your hand by clicking on the raise hand icon, and that will indicate to me that you wish to speak. I don't see any raised hands, and Ms. Gu, could you confirm that we didn't receive any public comment for this item?
For this particular item, we did not receive any public comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. And then if we could bring it back to the site plan. Thank you, Mr. Russell. So, you know, I thank you for a very thorough presentation, and in your letter, I read it. I go hiking all the time, so I pass the Cater water treatment plant a lot, and so I'm really familiar with the site. I think that I was interested to hear that this particular location was not your first choice, but I also understand in terms of our city facilities and how the planning, the master planning for these types of facilities, oftentimes there's lots of future development proposed and kind of future considerations. So trying to kind of work with the, trying to find the next best alternative that meets your criteria, but also is the most minimal impact to the site in terms of grading and landscaping. And overall, I think I didn't, looking at it, I think that you know, this is a phenomenal benefit to the city and the residents in terms of our grid resiliency and kind of the necessary, you know, as we think about all these kind of unplanned outings and what the potential for this type of support could be. And, you know, I don't have too many questions. I had, there was one question to staff, and I just wanted to clarify because I know that the Parks and Recs Commission approved I know that they approved the removal of the 7 trees. And just to clarify with Mr. Bauman, I'm guessing that 1-to-1 ratio replacement is a condition of the Parks and Recs Commission. Is that correct? That it would be, the project is conditioned through their process?
I didn't, well, that process happened before they submitted the application to us. I don't know for sure if it was a proposal or
Yes.
a condition, but the.
It is a condition.
Okay.
I think
Thank
that's
you.
how I read it, but I just wanted to clarify that because I would have conditioned it here, but I think with the Parks and Recs Commission, that it's will be addressed through their process. And I understand that you'll be working with the city arborist in terms of the placement, and then also with the ABR for the landscape plan. So I can go ahead and just make my findings that I believe that this front setback modification is necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on the lot, and that this project is consistent with the purpose and intent of the Santa Barbara Municipal Code. You know, the location of the fence and revised landscaping is consistent with the overall purpose of the setback and street frontage along the facilities, along the street with the facility. And overall, it's the siting of this particular piece is supportable as I recognize that there are future developments, so that this alternative site does the best job in terms of making sure that there's minimal impact to the area. So I agree with staff's assessment that overall the project is consistent with the Title 30 zoning ordinance, and again, that we have the benefit of this community facility and institution, and that we've got added resilience that will be coming our way through this type of project. So overall, that's my decision. I can say that my decision can be appealed. There's a 10-day appeal process if anybody wishes to. I'm going to have Mr. Russell pull up the appeal slide here. That anybody could appeal my decision within 10 calendar days, that you would need to do so by following these instructions. Alternatively, if someone in the Planning Commission disagrees with my decision or has questions or wishes to review it, they have the ability to suspend my decision as well within that same 10 calendar day appeal period. All right, so that's my decision. Again, I thank both Mr. Boundman and Ms. Sager for your presentations, and good luck. I think just one final thought, that so much of this project is, I'm relying heavily on the ABR and the landscape plan. I know that they will do a phenomenal job of making sure that in terms of screening, this type of project, like I'm looking at just one piece of it, but I think the critical piece will be that landscape plan and how ABR reviews the screening along the road and kind of beautifies it. So no doubt you're in good hands with ABR, and thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Kukenda. Thanks, everyone.
My pleasure. Okay, so moving on to the next project. Give me one moment. Okay, so this is item B, which is 934 East Haley Street. This is a proposal for a new 750 square foot garage with an 890 square foot accessory dwelling unit above. An existing single car garage is proposed to be removed. 2 trees are proposed for removal in the front yard setback, and the guy wire supporting the power pole on the east side is proposed to be relocated. Modifications to the front setback, maximum accessory building floor area, and open yard standards are requested. So again, as just went through, the discretionary applications under the jurisdiction of the staff hearing officer today required for this project are a floor area modification to grant relief of the maximum accessory building floor area standard, an open yard modification to reduce the existing conforming open yard on the parcel, and then lastly, a front setback modification to allow encroachments into the North Aliso Street front setback. Okay, so I just want to note that this project was originally agendized for February 9th, but it was continued to a date certain of today. I think that there's a mistake on this slide. It says September 9th, but actually it meant February 9th, so I can at least clarify that. But so I have Mr. Dostalek here to present the project, and then we will pass it over to the applicant, Mr. Brunel, if after that. Thank you so much. And Mr. Dostalek, whenever you're ready.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Kukenda, and good morning. I'm Robert Dostalek, Associate Planner with the Community Development Department. And Ms. Kukenda touched on the project description. Today, we have a combination ADU and garage structure. And we'll be focusing on 3 modifications that are proposed or that are in conjunction with the proposal that includes a front setback modification, modification to maximum accessory building floor area, and a modification to the open yard standards. And just for some general orientation, the project site is at 934 East Haley in the East Side General Plan neighborhood of the city at the intersection of East Haley Street and North Aliso Street. Thank you for that. The project site is zoned R2 with a general plan designation of medium density residential, and the properties surrounding the project site are zoned for and developed with residential improvements as well. And just to touch on the background, the subject property is developed with a 1-story single-family residence and a detached single-car garage on a 6,250 square foot lot. And the property is a corner lot with the primary frontage along East Haley Street and the secondary frontage along North Aliso Street. And if you could scroll to the elevations on sheet A2. And we'll touch on the floor area modification first. The municipal code limits the The total floor area for attached and detached covered parking and other detached accessory buildings to 1,300 square feet for lots between 5,000 square feet and 9,999 square feet. And the floor area modification is requested to increase the total amount of building floor area to 1,640 square feet. And staff is supportive of this modification because it would secure an appropriate improvement on the lot. Currently, the site does not provide any conforming or functional off-street parking. The existing non-conforming single-car garage that is along Haley Street is dilapidated, does not meet the required interior dimensional requirements, and is located in both the front and interior setbacks along East Haley Street. So it's non-conforming. And the proposed project would remove the existing parking and provide the 2 required covered off-street parking spaces for the main residence and an additional voluntary parking space for the ADU. And therefore 3 functional off-street parking spaces would serve to reduce on-street parking impacts in the neighborhood. And additionally, due to the zoning and lot characteristics, the parcel has the potential to be developed with a second residential unit that would not be subject to the accessory building floor area limitations. And the applicant has also stated that the intent of the project is to create a 2-bedroom configuration for the property owner's son with special needs and their caregiver. And the proposed ADU and parking would contribute to the city's housing stock and minimize potential parking impacts in the neighborhood. And if you could scroll back to the site plan, please. Excuse me. Thank you. And for the open yard modification, the existing project site conforms to the 1,250 square foot open yard requirement. And an open yard mod is requested to reduce the open yard to a total of 1,064 square feet. And this would be comprised of an 812 square foot area between the existing residence and Haley Street, between the existing residence and the proposed garage ADU. And then an additional 252 square foot area between East Haley Street and the existing residence where the garage would be removed. And staff is supportive of the open yard modification because it would secure an appropriate improvement on the lot. The subject lot is limited by 2 front setbacks due to the corner lot configuration and the location of the existing residence. And although the 2 open yard areas would not meet the minimum 20 foot by 20 foot dimensions, the areas would meet the 10 foot by 10 foot dimensions required for non-conforming open yards. And the areas would be usable and accessible by both dwelling units. And in addition, the relocation of the existing substandard parking would also create more open space and aesthetically improve the streetscape along Haley Street, where the garage is just immediately at the sidewalk. And for the front setback modification, the proposed accessory building includes covered parking on the lower level with an ADU above. And the second level ADU cantilevers over the garage and would encroach into the 20-foot front setback by approximately 3 feet. And you can see the dashed line in front of the parking stalls. And there's an indication, there's a dimension that indicates 17 feet. And additionally, there is a wing wall design feature on the lower level garage that would encroach 3 feet into the 20-foot setback required for street-facing covered parking. And you can see that feature in the upper left-hand corner. I think you just pointed to it. And that would be flush with the ADU above. And would align to create a more uniform appearance for the ADU. And a front setback modification is requested for both of these encroachments. Otherwise, the rest of the garage footprint would meet the required 20-foot front setback for street-facing parking. And staff is supportive of the proposed front setback modification because it would secure an appropriate improvement on the lot. The proposed encroachments are relatively minor, and the subject parcel is a corner lot and has 2 front setbacks, as noted earlier. The proposed building also is set further back than the existing residence and would be consistent with the existing pattern of development in the neighborhood. And if you could scroll to the elevations for a moment, just for this last remark, please. Thank you. And given the site's topography combined with the building the garage level 4 feet into the existing grade, you'll see that the structure would be stepped back from the existing residence and somewhat sunk into the lot, which would reduce the perceived height and massing from North Aliso Street. And the project did receive conceptual review by the Single Family Design Board this past November. And the board was supportive of the overall project as it was in keeping with the general fabric of the neighborhood in terms of size, bulk, and scale. And the project was forwarded to staff hearing officer with positive comments without requiring revisions to the proposal prior to the show action. And there are 2 trees that are proposed for removal in the area of the driveway and the new structure. And they're both in the North Aliso Street front setback. The proposed removal was approved by the Parks and Recreation Commission this past December, with the condition that the applicant provide 2 replacement trees that can achieve a minimum height of 20 feet or more at maturity. And a condition has been added to the condition has been added to ensure the replacement trees appear on the final plans. And the project site is located within archaeological sensitivity zones, and due to the depth and area of grading excavation, an archaeological letter report confirming no archaeological resources was required. And a report was prepared for the project and accepted by the environmental analyst. And we have the standard archaeological discovery clause added as a condition of approval. Otherwise, the environmental analyst has determined that the project is categorically exempt from further environmental review pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines. And with the ability to make the findings for each of those proposed or requested modifications, staff recommends that the staff hearing officer approve the project. And that concludes staff's presentation at this time, and I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dostalek. And I'd like to invite Mr. Burnell. If you'd like to turn your webcam on and unmute yourself.
Okay, I think, can you hear me?
I can hear you, and I just sent you a request to share your video. There you
There we
go.
go.
Hi.
Sorry, getting used to how this all works.
Yeah, exactly. It's always a little awkward,
Yeah.
but we've got you. So
Okay, good.
good to see you. And if you wouldn't mind, if you want to kind of walk us through your thinking on this project and kind of how you got to this particular sighting, and if there's anything else you want to follow up with what Mr. Dostalek said.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think it's, Mr. Dostalek did a great job of explaining the whole project. It's pretty straightforward. The owner is looking to add a detached unit where she can provide housing for her son who has some special needs and needs a caregiver. And so it seems like the simplest approach would be to do an accessory dwelling unit as opposed to going with an R2 development. And of course, parking is an important thing that is needed in the area. As was mentioned, the existing garage is really not functional. I noticed that there's been quite a bit of feedback from the neighbors, and I don't know if anyone's planning to speak today, but the overwhelming majority of it is complaining that, you know, if you do a development like this, you're going to really impact the parking, which is very problematic in this neighborhood. And most of the people don't seem to understand that we're actually adding quite a bit of parking. It's going to be much better than it is now. So I just want to kind of clarify that in case someone comes on and talks about it. I did reach out and speak to a couple of people and explain that, and then they felt better, but I don't know how to contact most of them. They're just emails to the city. So because of the lot, if you could switch to the site plan, being kind of a long lot that goes back from Haley Street, it's pretty clear, you know, there's a lot of land back there that is available to do the second unit. And so, and it's really nice to be able to have a secondary access off Aliso Street rather than Haley Street. So it provides a sense of separation between the units. I think there's a couple of things that I wanted to go through as far as the modifications. This is, in my understanding of from what I've experienced with how mods usually go, is a very unusual situation because, you know, if the modifications aren't granted, then the owner you go back to the drawing board and, well, how can we solve this without doing it? And typically you just say, well, you can't have the lower setback for the larger unit. But in this case, there are ways to solve all of these and the changes what I think would be a net negative to the overall development. So in other words, as Robert mentioned, we're caught in this thing that an ADU is accessory structure, but an R2 is not. So if we go to R2, you're going to have a much bigger development and it won't be limited. The other option is you can build the garage first and it won't exceed the accessory structure. And then state law doesn't allow you to stop an ADU based on accessory footage. So there's this phasing thing that would be, other neighbor complaints have to do with, noise and construction in the neighborhood. So you would make that much worse. So, and the open yard requirements are ordinances allow you to reduce the garage to 500 square feet and therefore reduce the open yard to 800. So that's a way to make all of that work without modifications. But obviously, the unit above is going to be the same size. You won't actually have any more yard. You'll just have an awkward development and less parking. So that seems like a terrible way to solve that. And same thing with the setback. She can't really make the unit smaller because it won't work for what she wants to do. So then your option is to think about, well, if we eliminate the garage, it's no longer a two-story structure. We no longer have a 20-foot setback. Then the building can be bigger and closer to the street, none of which is really good because it's still as imposing or nearly as imposing as it would be because it would be up on top of the hill. So I just wanted to kind of point all that out, that those are unusual circumstances for modifications. And I think Robert described the justifications for them. There is a building across the street that has 3 of the same modifications that was granted a while back. And so that really speaks to the patterns of development in the neighborhood that I think we comply with. Beyond that, I think I would just be available to answer questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Burnell. I appreciate it. And I'm going to open up public comment first, and then we can come back to questions. So if you are joining us by webinar and you wish to speak on this particular item, please raise your hand by clicking on the raise hand icon, and I will send you an unmute request. I do not see any raised hands at the moment. But I did receive public comment for this item, and there were 3 individuals who reached out, and one was Beatrice Dorado, Lourdes Dorado, and then Casa Rosas. So all 3 reached out and submitted public comment. I still don't see any hands raised, and I'm just going to ask Ms. Gu if there was anyone else, in addition to the 3 that I mentioned, who forwarded comments.
No, we didn't receive any recent comment on this particular item, just the 3 that you mentioned previous.
Okay, great. Yes, perfect. I just acknowledged that. Yes, we received those several weeks ago, and since this item was continued, I just want to make sure to acknowledge them. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close public comment for now, and then ask Mr. Burnell to join us again by video. And so I would just love to understand, so having been out on site and looking at the area and kind of seeing how the development, kind of the neighborhood development and the different patterns, and reading the public comment, I have a sense of kind of what's happening here on the street in this corner. I was just curious to hear your considerations. I also watched the Single Family Design Board meeting and read through the minutes. I'm curious what your privacy considerations are for the neighbor with that 2nd-story deck that's proposed, and kind of if you could walk me through your thinking on that in terms of the design.
Yeah, be happy to. I've been a little confused about whose purview that's under and whether that's something you wanted to discuss. So I didn't really.
Well, I should say, let me just clarify that the Single Family Design Board is, like, their review are the aesthetics. And so I won't touch the building, but I deal with nuisance issues, and privacy is being one of them. So yeah. I'm really most interested in and the privacy aspect of it, but I will leave the design and orientate, that is outside of my purview, and that's really what the single family design board. So I'm just, if you could generally speak to about if you think that if there are any privacy issues or what your considerations are, that would help me. And yeah, I can follow up any other questions that you might have regarding that.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about it. That I think the deck works much better on the other side, or on the side where we have it now. And the board made the suggestion, well, maybe you would want to flip the whole floor plan and get it on the north side of the building, which sounds okay on the surface, but I think is actually a really bad idea for a whole bunch of reasons. But in terms of the privacy, we feel that it does not create a privacy impact because the neighboring house on the south side is 3 feet further back than the front of our deck. And so whatever view we have down there would be into the front yard, which is not normally where you're trying to protect privacy. And because that's a really long, deep lot, I think it's unlikely that somebody's going to do a development in the future and be requesting or getting a front yard modification that would move their building closer. It's also on the other side of a driveway, so effectively you've got another probably 10 feet of setback that you wouldn't otherwise have. And the deck and the building are now designed with a wing wall that covers probably 2/3 of the side of the deck viewing in that direction. So we just don't think that it really presents much of a privacy impact. And I think the intention, the code uses the a term of useful space for outdoor living and enjoyment. And the option of flipping it the other way creates a situation where the stairway would have to come up. You would have to circulate to the back of the lot and come up the stairs the other direction in order to make that work and land on the deck, which would now be extending in kind of a double cantilever situation, which would be less attractive. And then you would circulate through the deck to then enter the unit kind of through the kitchen. So now the use of that deck would really not be a private outdoor space. There would be circulation. And it's also kind of bringing the deck over to the north so that it's kind of focusing, because there's kind of a 90-degree configuration of the floor plan that tends to focus the deck in a direction. So it would focus it now to the kind of to the northeast, right into the other 2-story building that's there, as opposed to on the south side, the road is dropping away. There are more 1-story residences in that direction. So you kind of tend to see out and over the other buildings. So it's much, much better in terms of how it feels and how it would be able to be used. And then it wouldn't put the outdoor area between the buildings and the deck right next to each other, where in theory those could compromise each other. And the last piece is, in order to get to the stair, you would essentially have to carve out another 4 feet next to the stair to walk past it and get up the stair. Whereas now you come up the stair from the street and you go right up the step, and it doesn't impact the yard. So I just think there's so many reasons that it's much better the way it is. And it's nowhere near being able to impact somebody's rear yard outdoor space, which is normally the problem that comes up with having a deck close to an interior yard, is that you can see into somebody's backyard or right into the windows of their house, which is not the case in this situation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And in terms of, I agree with you. I don't, given the siting of it and the setback of the adjacent neighbor, as well as facing the front yard and the driveway, I have less privacy concerns in that particular area, and appreciate your explanation for that. I also, so this might be a question for Mr. Dostalek. So I see that and actually, Mr. Russell, if you could zoom in on the garage just a little bit more. It looks like, so the garage is just a little bit deeper than the minimum depth for parking. Is that correct? Just by a couple feet, the minimum depth is 20 feet for parking. Is that accurate?
That is often seen, yes.
Okay. I think one of my biggest concerns, because just looking at all the public comments that that parking is a major concern, and I know that parking came up at the for the single family design board, and that's not in their purview. This project in and of itself is creating 3 new parking spaces where, even though there was technically 1 parking space on site, it was non-conforming and you couldn't really fit a car, it wasn't used for parking. So I think I'm just curious about the storage on site, and, I see that you could have a couple feet, but that, it's really important in terms of this decision that the area actually be used for parking and not storage. And I know that our municipal code, you're not supposed to use covered parking for storage. We do see that. But if I were to grant an approval for the accessory space, just to, if make sure, if you could talk a little bit more about any storage or kind of the intention behind this proposal, and how you see that being enough on site.
Are you asking me or Robert?
That's for you, Mr. Burnell. So I just wanted the depth. I know that there's a couple extra feet that could be used potentially, but I just want to make sure that beyond the minimum requirements for parking, how do you see storage being addressed here on site?
Okay, good. Yeah, I think our best bet is going to be to use the extra depth, which there was some back and forth about exactly how big the garage was going to be, that we had it larger at one time, but planning is not comfortable with the garage being larger than it needs to be. So there was pushback on that. And so we ended up bringing the garage in on the west property line and cantilevering the unit cantilevers over it to the 4-foot setback. Now, because of the nature of the way the garage is cut into the hill, the unit above goes down to the ground, so you don't see the cantilever on that end. But it does create an opportunity to extend into that area and create additional storage. And we would also do cabinets and things that were up high that would not impact the ability of the cars to park, so that we could get more storage that way. And other than that, no, we haven't made special accommodations for storage beyond, what's there on the site now, what will be, where the yard would be able to be used to put things.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I do think that, again, without impacting transportation staff's requirements for minimum parking or inhibiting that, just to have a small extra, a little bit of space for cabinet, something that, again, would not impact, is beneficial. Because the one thing that I have the most concerns of is just being able, providing more parking, but then actually giving more storage. So again, with the neighbors' concerns, and we know what people typically do, we see garages often being used for storage. And I know that I just want to make sure that if anybody's watching, that our municipal ordinance doesn't allow items to be stored in the garage where covered parking is supposed to be. So I can go ahead and those were the questions that I have. I really appreciate, Mr. Burnell, your letter was very thorough in your justifications for your requests, and I appreciate staff's input on the design. And I agree in that I'm going to start with the floor area modification, so that I find that the floor area modification, it would secure an appropriate improvement on the lot, because the project would remove that existing non-conforming substandard garage and then provide functional off-street parking, 3 parking spaces for both the main residence as well as the proposed accessory dwelling unit. And the benefit of that is to reduce the off-street parking, so that You could relieve the parking impacts from the neighborhood, and I think that that's an appropriate improvement. And that, you know, with the R2 zoning and the lot size, the argument of the accessory building floor area limitations, you know, with the accessory dwelling unit, I think this is the type of development that makes the most sense. Mr. Burnell had mentioned the different ways that you could phase development or propose just a second unit. And instead, this proposal is more straightforward. There's less impact. That it's easier to do everything at once. And so I'm supportive of the floor area modification as in terms of having an accessory dwelling unit contribute to the city's housing stock. And I think it's the process of the path of least resistance and makes sense for that regard. In terms of the open yard modification, similarly, this is an appropriate improvement of the lot. I really appreciate the applicant's citing of the garage and kind of being able and kind of the orientation of the accessory dwelling unit to preserve the most usable open space. It's a very minimal impact. This is a constrained lot because it's a corner lot. And so it's really hard sometimes to find conforming open yard areas, but the proposed areas make sense with the development and that they're still meeting the 10 by 10 non-conforming open yard area. And the relocation, as I was mentioning just a moment ago, of the 3-car garage and accessory dwelling unit really improves the ability to have open space for both the main residence and the accessory dwelling unit, and makes sense aesthetically. Again, I agree with staff from East Haley Street. And lastly, there's the front setback modification. And similarly, I can make the finding that's an appropriate improvement on the lot. This is the corner lot has 2 front setbacks, and it's really difficult to find conforming options with 2 setbacks. So the 3-foot encroachment of the ADU and the garage wing wall are relatively minor, and generally they're consistent with the intent and purposes of our zoning ordinance and to the existing pattern of development in this particular neighborhood. And yeah, I will say that my approvals of these 3 modifications are subject to the conditions that are outlined in the staff report. I just wanted to ask Mr. Burnell if you had any questions about these conditions that Mr. Dostalek included in the staff report.
No, they're all pretty clear.
Okay, excellent. And this is, again, I just want to clarify that, you know, my decision, really what I'm trying to approve and say to the members of the public and for the people who live in this neighborhood is that this is supposed to be a garage for parking. So I really don't want there to be stored items in those parking spaces once it's developed, and there is an enforcement process to follow up on that. I'm not going to add any other conditions about that because I think our municipal code addresses that, and we have an enforcement process if it's not used that way. And it does look like there might be a little bit of additional, not much, but maybe an additional space beyond the required parking area that could be used for some storage, which I think is beneficial as well, because we all know that it's helpful to have items that are stored, just a few things. Okay, well, with that, that's my decision. My decision can be appealed within 10 calendar days. Thank you, Mr. Russell, for pulling this up. And it would be appealed to the Planning Commission. So please follow these steps if you have any concerns about my decision or wish to appeal. The Planning Commission also has the ability to pull my decision and suspend it within that same 10 calendar day appeal time period. Thank you, Mr. Burnell and Mr. Dostalek, and we will move on to the next item. Okay. So last but not least, I have 2111 Anacapa Street. This is item C. This is a proposal for a lot line adjustment to transfer 1,750 square feet from 2111 Anacapa Street to 23 East Padre Street. The proposal also includes a lot area modification request to reduce the lot size of the 2111 Anacapa Street property. The discretionary applications under the jurisdiction of the staff hearing officer required for this project are a lot line adjustment to transfer approximately 1,750 square feet of lot area from 2111 Anacapa Street to 23 East Padre Street, and a lot area modification to reduce the lot area of the existing non-conforming lot at 2111 Anacapa Street from 8,000 square feet to 6,250 square feet. And then Mr. Dostalek, you're back again. You've had a lot going on this week, and I would appreciate if you could walk us through this project. And I see that we have the applicant here as well. And so we'll start off with you, Mr. Dostalek, and then I'll pass it over to Ms. Allen for follow-up.
Sounds good. Thank you again, Ms. Kokinda. I'm Robert Dostalek with Community Development. And we only have a couple of exhibits today, so we might toggle a little bit back and forth. And thank you for reading the project description into the record. So we have a lot line adjustment proposal today to transfer 1,750 square feet from 2111 Anacapa to 23 East Padre. And in conjunction with that, a lot area modification is requested. And some general bearings. The project site is located in the Upper East neighborhood of the city near the intersection of Anacapa Street and East Padre Street. And both subject properties are zoned RS15 with a low density residential land use designation. And both are developed with single unit residences, and the surrounding properties in the vicinity are also improved with the residential improvements and zoned residential as well. And yeah, if we could keep it on the survey sheet for a moment. The average slope of the Padre Street parcel is 13%, and the average slope of the Anacapa Street parcel is 16%. So a minimum of lot size of 22,500 square feet is required for each lot. So both lots are currently non-conforming to that minimum standard. The proposed lot line adjustment would significantly reduce the 2111 Anacapa Street's non-conforming lot area, and that would even be well below what would be required if the lot had a slope of less than 10%. And both parcels are undersized, as noted, and the applicant has explained that the objective of the lot line adjustment is to add an accessory dwelling unit in the reconfigured area of the 23 East Padre parcel. And if you could scroll to the second exhibit, this shows the lot line configuration as proposed. So this would be the adjusted lot configuration. And where the two lots merge, you can see the faint line of the existing lot that creates this notch in the 23 East Padre parcel. And it should be noted that a reasonably sized ADU could be developed on the Padre Street parcel in its current configuration. So the notch on the parcel is about 30 feet wide by 50 feet deep, and with 4-foot interior setbacks that would apply to an ADU on both sides. Per the existing ADU ordinance, the site could accommodate an ADU with a 27-foot width dimension. And the reconfigured Padre Street parcel would create, however, it would create a more spacious and flexible area to site a prospective ADU. However, again, the Anacapa Street parcel would become smaller, which would potentially limit that site's ability to be developed with a second residential ADU in the future. And although staff agrees that it makes sense to eliminate the notch from the Padre Street parcel to create a more logical and uniform lot pattern, the preference would be to enlarge the Anacapa Street lot because it is the smaller of the two and has a slightly steeper slope. However, with that said, the adjusted depth of 125 feet for the Anacapa lot would be consistent with 4 of the other 6 parcels that lie on the southwest side of Anacapa Street, bound by Los Olivos Street and East Padre Street. And it should also be noted that due to the current lot sizes, it is not possible for a lot line adjustment to result in both of the lots complying with the minimum lot area. The city is generally not supportive of lot area modification requests unless in conjunction with a housing unit that would be affordable to low-income households. However, due to the combination of the city's housing needs combined in addition with recent state legislation related to ADUs and less legislation related to 2-unit development and subdivisions on single residence zoned lots, the proposal would potentially align with the goal of facilitating housing development. And although the prospective ADU would not be a dedicated affordable unit, due to the floor area limitations on ADUs and their subordinate size to the primary dwelling on the lot, ADUs are considered more affordable by design compared with other housing types available in the city. In addition, a specific purpose of residential zones is to provide for a full range of housing options to meet the needs of all segments of the community, consistent with the general plan. And further, both, as you can see in this exhibit here, both adjusted lots would maintain the minimum required open yard area of 1,250 square feet. So both lots would still be able to maintain air circulation, light access, et cetera. And additionally, an ADU on either lot would not adversely affect the character of the existing neighborhood because it must be designed to be compatible with the design of the primary residential unit or undergo design review. And in the past, the city has generally not been supportive of lot line adjustments where a parcel became more non-conforming to a standard. However, as noted, supporting this request would be consistent with the purpose of the residential zone, with existing patterns of development for the neighborhood, and also consistent with the goals of the general plan and in the spirit of recent state legislation that was noted. And for these reasons, staff is in general support of the lot area modification as proposed. The municipal code and state law require that the proposed lot line adjustment be consistent with the city's general plan and zoning and building ordinances. And with the approval of the requested lot area modification, the resulting parcels would comply with all zoning standards for the RS-15 zone and would be consistent with the general plan and building ordinances. For environmental review, the environmental analyst has determined that the project is categorically exempt from further environmental review pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines. And with the ability to make the required findings, staff recommends that the staff hearing officer approve the project. And that concludes staff's presentation. And again, I'll be on the sidelines if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dostalek. I appreciate it. And Ms. Allen, I see you're here. Also had a long week, late night, last night, early morning. Same thing with Mr. Dostalek. So please go ahead and if you'd like to walk me through your thinking and your request, and if you want to follow up on anything that Robert had mentioned or Mr. Dostalek had mentioned, and then we can go from there.
Sounds good. This is Trish Allen with Suzanne Elledge, Planning and Permitting. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Dostalek. I think you gave a really concise summary and hit on all the points for a little project that kind of touches quite a few city planning, policy issues. And, certainly we're in a unique time given the state legislation that has passed these last few years that I think facilitates this type of project to create a lot configuration that really is consistent with the pattern of development in this neighborhood, and really achieving the owner's goals to create a really lovely, usable, functional open yard subsequent to this lot line adjustment. So I just want to hit on a couple of the project objectives and maybe answer a question or two that came up since the release of the staff report and the site visit with Ms. Kokenda. So really the focus on the Padre lot, and this is a great slide to leave up for now. Thank you. So the objectives are to create a detached ADU in the back of the Padre parcel, along with a pool and other site and landscape improvements, really again, to align with the owner's goal to create an aesthetic and functional outdoor area. Certainly that's part of a separate project, but we can't do anything until we have the adequate lot area in which to achieve those objectives. With the, as we refer to it, the notch, Mr. Russell, are you able to point to the area in the back of the open space of the Anacapa parcel where it shows, yeah, just to the left of that, where it says existing lot lines to be able to, again, so just
Can
for
I,
Ms. Cook, go ahead.
really quick interjection. Mr. Russell, do you actually mind zooming in just a little bit more for us? Sorry, thank you. That's helpful.
I think that's a better view to see where the existing parcels are. I don't really know how to annotate this and highlight, so I'm not going to get hung up on the technology, but really you can see what we're trying to achieve here, a uniform lot configuration that makes sense for both properties, really, and absorb this notch, if you will, from the Anacapa parcel into the Padre parcel. Now, while the staff report does recognize that the existing area would accommodate, an ADU that's reasonably sized, I'm not going to disagree with that, but it really does limit other amenities that are desired. So I think that's an important consideration. Again, the proposed lot line adjustment will result in uniform parcel configurations. As we talked about, there are other parcels of a similar depth that would be matching on the block of Anacapa with this adjustment. Further, we talk about this a little bit in our applicant letter. I'm not sure if the staff report did, but one of the considerations too are the sizes of the homes. The Padre home is a bit larger than the Anacapa home. And with this lot line adjustment, we find that there's not a lot of difference between the resultant floor to lot area ratio. So just, it feels very comfortable. We're not really pushing too much development on one parcel or the other. Again, this adjustment would not have any bearing on increased density for either parcel. And I don't think the lot line adjustment would preclude an ADU, for example, to be developed on the Anacapa parcel. There's a garage, not that my client is interested in doing that, but just to understand that there is room still to accommodate an ADU on the Anacapa parcel if that is desired in the future. One of the questions that I believe was forwarded from Mr. Dostalik from you, Ms. Kokenda, was just, well, what, we're making the larger lot of the two larger by 1,750 square feet. Why not make the Anacapa property larger? But really, that would further constrain the usable area for the Padre site. And the more I thought about this, I really kind of started to focus on the building footprints and sort of the placement of the existing homes. And I think that this exhibit shows what I was thinking. You've kind of got, if you can focus on the open yard area that's identified on the Padre parcel, and then consider, the sort of almost square up at the top of the slide where we would want to do an ADU, and and swimming pool. So the footprint of the house kind of pushes into that usable open space back there. And so that's part of our consideration really, is to not, squeeze a lot of development back there. We want to have a nice, functional, usable, aesthetically pleasing yard and the ADU to fit in that space. And so for all those reasons and the justifications that we included in our letter that were also reiterated in the staff report, we feel like that this is the right adjustment for these properties. And I think with that, I will leave it to questions from you, Ms. Kukinda. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. I appreciate it. Okay, before we go to questions, I'm going to open up public comment. So if you are joining us by webinar and wish to speak on this particular item, please raise your hand by clicking on the raise hand icon, and I will send you an unmute request. I don't see any raised hands at the moment. Ms. Gu, did we receive any public comment on this item? I had not as of this morning.
No, we did not receive any public comment on this particular item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I still don't see any raised hands, so I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and go back to questions. And Mr. Russell, if you could take us back to that. Perfect. That's perfect right there. So I think, Ms. Allen, you took the question out of my mouth in terms of wondering why you selected, like why you wanted to enlarge the Padre Street parcel. So thank you for your response. I mean, I don't have a ton of questions. That was really the biggest one. I guess, I just want to acknowledge that as part of a lot line adjustment, we generally don't ask for landscape plans. It's not part of our request. And in terms of conditions, there's limitations to when you can make a lot line adjustment approval of you can't really tack on many conditions with that. And so I'm just really curious that when I went out on site, I found overall it was very illuminating. But I think the hardest thing is just seeing this. It'll be interesting to see a perspective design for an ADU and a landscape plan, because where it bisects the Anacapa parcel is much more, it's going right through a bocce court, and there are big hedges. And I think that would be really interesting kind of future development. But I think the more that I thought about this and the kind of which area would you add that lot area to, I think the East Padre parcel actually makes more sense. And that's where I think the site visit was illuminating. Based on the Anacapa Street parcel has that really steep slope of a driveway, and then you go back up, and the East Padre lot is much more of a gradual slope. And either way, you think about if you're proposing an accessory dwelling unit in the rear of that back corner, what's the easiest way to get back there? And imagining, the carrying the groceries, or, what does that look like? And just for ease, to me, based on the site conditions, it seems to make the most sense to have the area be dedicated to the East Padre lot. And I wouldn't have necessarily thought that had I not gone out on that site visit. I can say that. And I guess one thing you had mentioned, an accessory dwelling unit and a pool. This is just a question, again, it's not before me today, but are you intending to keep the existing pool, or would that be removed and then a new pool proposed at the rear?
Thank you. The pool that's existing in the front yard of Padre would be removed, and a new pool constructed in the backyard area.
Okay.
That is the long-term goal.
That's what I thought. Okay. So That was, I'm trying to think the other questions. I went out on site, did a thorough walkthrough of both parcels, looked at the neighboring development to kind of understand, I see that the parcel map, there are other parcels that have similar lot lines. It does seem to, I think that this is a reasonable request. I think, again, I know that the landscape plan is not part of my purview and there's no specific development proposed, but in the future, I do think it's going to be really critical to have a landscape plan that makes sense. If a new parcel line is created, and I'm sure that that is also part of the intention. But right now, you wouldn't read where this new parcel line is proposed based on the landscaping and the bisected bocce ball court. And, it doesn't look like a parcel that's being proposed. So I would hope to see that as part of the design. And I do know that this is subject to the design review being in the Mission Area Special Design District, so that even if an accessory dwelling unit is proposed, there might be aspects to a development that might require design review. So I can go ahead and make my findings. I'm going to start with the lot area modification because that's really needed in order to do this lot line adjusted. That I believe that the lot area modification is generally consistent with the purposes and intent of the residential single unit zone, and it would maintain the character of the neighborhood. Ultimately, you're providing the range of housing options, the proposal for or the idea that the adjustment for both parcels will maintain the minimum open yard requirements to make sure that there's adequate air and light and useful space for both parcels is supportable. And generally, the way that it would ultimately preserve the overall livability of both the existing primary residential unit as well as the prospective accessory dwelling unit. It's generally consistent with the existing patterns of development in the neighborhood, and ultimately it's keeping with the other parcels that are shown on another plan sheet. But I can support staff's findings on that. And then moving to the lot line adjustment. So the findings are different for lot line adjustments than modifications. And I find that, with my approval of the lot area modification, that the lot line adjustment will conform to both the general plan and the zoning and building ordinances. And that ultimately, I didn't have any issues. Like I said, only once I got out on site, I think the gradual slope of the East Padre lot and the idea of having a unit back there, it would be easier to kind of maneuver and get to than if you had tried to create that lot line adjustment on the move that little notch and enlarge the Anacapa Street parcel just based on the kind of the intense slope from the driveway and then the slope back up, it's less gradual. So I think a unit and having to get, good luck to anyone who wants to get back there. You're going to probably have to go through a little wonderland of landscaping in order to make that happen in the future. But those are my decisions. And I haven't added any conditions. But like I said, I'm looking forward to once the development is proposed for an accessory dwelling unit, again, in order to add to our housing stock, and then have the opportunity for a landscape plan to be to be addressed at that time to make the lot lines make more sense visually. And I'm sure that that will come in time with that proposal. So those are my decisions. My decision may be appealed within 10 calendar days of this decision. And if a member of the Planning Commission wishes, they may suspend my decision within that 10 calendar day time period as well. And again, thank you, Mr. Dostalik. Thank you, Ms. Allen. And the meeting is adjourned. That was our last item for today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you both appreciate it.
All right, everybody have a great day. Thanks again.